You've probably seen this. And you've probably seen a lot of lefties gloating over it, which I think is completely legitimate. I think they have every right to. So Mark Carney is an interesting guy. I don't think he's a good person. What he's not, though, at least primarily, is a politician. You know, the job of a politician, at least in the modern Western world, is to find a way to convince the voters that you are doing things in their interest while facilitating the interests of the people who got you elected, or at the very least, the people who keep the country running. He's a banker and a technocrat, so sometimes his political instincts err differently than others might, you know? I don't think he's necessarily much more liberal than fucking Trudeau or whatever, right? It's not really about how left he is. It's more like a matter of pragmatism, honesty, maybe?
We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim.
Oh my God, he admitted? I mean, I feel like hearing this said out loud might not hit that hard if you've mostly been into politics post-Bernie, like 2016. But, sorry, I'm not trying to like belittle you or anything. It's just that if you are an internet lefty, what he just said is obvious and always has been. But this is never acknowledged by Western leaders, ever. The idea that the international rules-based order is and always has been kind of fake, you know, partial, you know, privileged, that it's not been like a fair arbiter of justice. Again, everyone knows this, at least everyone serious, but they would never, ever, 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 ever admit it. So hearing it out loud at the World Economic Forum, and by the way, I don't actually remember if it's included in this clip, but his speech, his broader speech, was met with tremendous applause. This was something, you know, he was finding a lot of agreement in the audience, you know, but he got a standing ovation after speech. Thank you for confirming what I said. Yes, no, people like his speech, which, again, the idea of the ghouls at the World Economic Forum giving a standing ovation to the idea that the underlying geopolitical principle that has legitimized their rule over the world for the past 80 or so years, very odd.
This fiction was useful. And American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window. We participated in the rituals, and we largely avoided
the rituals. Man, it's so honest. The thing that pisses me off, though, is that like this position is radical enough in the zeitgeist that mainline Democrats would disagree with this, or at least they would if you mentioned it in the context of Israel, right? What Mark Carney is essentially saying is that the rules have always been unfair, but the belief that they are fair, the shared myth that the rules are fair, allowed a convenient and stable world order to reign. One that has been enormously profitable for basically everyone who's been able to get in on it. From the fact that the seas are safe to travel on, which was not the case historically and may not necessarily be the case in the future. The fact that you have like standardized international shipping and trade for like basically every country in the world. It is a modern miracle that a ship docked at basically any port on Earth can set sail and then land at basically any port on Earth, that people can trade that freely, that due to the standardization of currency, due to the standardization of the rules of trade, we have like set standards that allow like basically everywhere on Earth, right? Like not North Korea or whatever, but besides a couple of exceptions, it's a miraculous time. You know, we've all kind of taken it for granted. I think Mark Carney's, well, I mean, as he's about to say, it's over.
Calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited.
Dude, this is very unliberal. You are correct. This is post-liberal. This is illiberal in like the strictest sense, because what he's essentially saying is that the dream of globalization, of trade, of the shared political infrastructure that allows global trade to function the way it does, is now being weaponized in a way that makes it undesirable. And yes, admittedly, it is pretty that the United States can get basically anything it wants by threatening tariffs to any country, anywhere, even if, like, that country shouldn't rely on them. Like, pardon me for taking a medieval attitude towards international trade, but if a country is capable of producing its own food and building its own, infrastructure and getting its doodads and widgets from itself or its neighboring countries, why the would a tariff from America hurt it so badly? Like, what are you hurting? Sure, there's international trade, but a lot of it is also the global financial scheme, right? The over-liberalization of global trade and the financialization of the economy, which he's also referring to here, plus the fact, yes, that we all rely on the US dollar, means that even if a country makes an effort at independence, at the end of the day, everyone has to bend the knee to the United States. And he's right. We all talk about, well, oh, the US dollar's going down, haha, Trump's ruining America. Dog, he's ruining like the world. The 2008 financial crisis was caused entirely by subprime mortgage loan gambling from American banks. The world suffered the consequences. Every country. I don't know if North Korea did or not. I'm sure they were affected in some way. Like it's like, how do I put this? You know how it's a miracle that Amazon can get an order to you within 24 hours, but then the Suez Canal gets blocked by the Evergreen, and all of a sudden, like, the global shipping, like, everything grinds to a halt, and every second that passes without it being blocked or like cleared, it like you lose $50 billion or whatever. By streamlining the global trade system, the order for international trade to the like tightest and most cost-efficient possible point, any rupture in that system causes enormous disruption, Rather than building robust systems that function and have like fail-safes and backups, you build like stuff that's meant to operate on the bleeding edge, which is great, by the way. What Amazon does right now is genuinely miraculous. The distribution system that they offer the world is unparalleled in human history and might be unparalleled in all history, in the past or the future, because there is a fundamental instability to this kind of order. It goes beyond just like, well, is it bad for the environment? Is it bad for labor conditions? Yes and yes, okay? But the relegation to efficiency often places your systems in the command of central authorities that do not always have your best interests in mind. It was efficient to allow the United States to develop Pax Americana and secure global trade. It was efficient to use the US dollar as the international reserve currency, just as it's efficient to allow Amazon to basically determine the pace at which all packages and letters are delivered within the United States, But who did we give the power to,
You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
Oh, the Ever Given, not the Evergreen. Ever Given operated by Evergreen Shipping. How confusing. How confusing. Carney also recently signed an agreement with China for direct currency exchange without USD as a middleman. Also exceptional, Again, the whole point of USD as a reserve currency is that it's a global point of contact between different currencies. If you can exchange the Canadian dollar with Chinese yuan directly, I mean, that's to spite India. Well, them, sure. Thank God Carney took this shit seriously from the jump. At least from a financial perspective, Mark Carney has been sound in his response to America. Politically, I think that he could have done more. Anyway, sorry. This is really, really, really important, okay? Like, it is a a shift in the zeitgeist that I don't think I've ever seen before, not anything even remotely comparable, certainly not in the World Economic Forum. The idea of a standing ovation being given to a speech that essentially calls for the de-liberalization of the global trading order entirely in response to American hegemony. This isn't some broad criticism, right? Like, this is done directly in response to what America is and what he's done. And yes, thank you so much, V-Raptor, for pointing out something that I had so stupidly forgotten to mention. He wrote the speech himself. That is very uncommon, especially at the World Economic Forum, which is a very technocratic institution. You know, normally you have your policy guys write your speech, talk about your trade priorities for the coming year, whatever else. He wrote it himself. I feel like World Economic Forum types have been feeling like this ever since Trump got into power. I listened to Larry Fink talk about similar stuff earlier in 2025. It is a genuine schism. It really is, between the liberals who understand what Trump represents and the threat that he poses to the world economic order, and the people who think they can coast this. But there is still a deeper schism, and a more important one, in my opinion. Trump isn't the problem. Trump would be nothing without his army of corporate apologists and backers. They're the ones who want Trump to keep pushing the line because they don't give a shit. See, that's another consequence of the globalization of finance. Nowadays, with corporations, they don't really give a if the country they're in suffers, you know? Like, let me put it this way. Ford, bad guy, wealthy guy. He built cars. He did a lot of stuff. We don't have to talk about all of it, okay? But here's something that's true. Ford would not have been happy if Americans suddenly stopped being able to buy his cars. If America had an economic downturn, if America suffered some catastrophic, one might call it a Great Depression, you know, the success of Ford's business is tied to the ability for people in the United States to buy his cars. It makes sense, right? That's how businesses ought to function. But nowadays, so much wealth is tied up in international financial schemes, right? It's all about, we've talked about, how many times have we talked about this before, right? It's not about building products or offering services. It's about borrowing money by leveraging your existing assets and then using the borrowed money to invest, and then using the gains from that investment to pay the interest on the money that you borrowed, and the additional money can be used as leverage to borrow more money, and the cycle continues. That process is international, you know? That's not like, you're not localized there. You can do that anywhere. And as a consequence of that, in many cases, the market does not actually have a direct, like, immediate incentive in the well-being of the country that they operate in, or the well-being of their population. Like, I guess I'll put it this way. NVIDIA's price, like their total shares, their market value right now, how much do you think that has to do with how many graphics cards they've sold recently? The biggest jump they've gotten recently to their company's valuation came from a promise to, in the future, sell graphics cards to other AI development companies. Where in this exactly is the well-being of the United States? Like, where in this is, we want the average American citizen to be able to afford graphics cards and buy them so that we make money? Nothing. It has nothing to do with any of that. Nobody has to sell anything. Nobody has to sell. Nobody has to build. And as a consequence, there's a disconnect. The incentives no longer exist. It used to be bad business to have the nation that you operate in torn apart and brought to ruin, but now that's not necessarily the case. The point here being, Trump isn't the problem. Trump is just the idiot they're pushing their agenda through. The underlying problems here are fundamental to the system. And not just the globalization of capital, but capital itself. I'm sorry, folks, I'm pulling the mask off. I am, in fact, still a socialist. This is the real schism, okay? As this sentiment, the stuff Mark Carney just said, gets more and more popular, liberals need to wake up. I'm sorry, I know it's an insufferable thing to say, wake up, take the mask off, you're a sheeple, whatever. I don't care, okay? You need to wake up on this. The economic pressures that are driving Trump, okay, that admittedly are going farther with Trump than they've been able to with other people, but that does not mean they won't try for this with other people. God, look at what happened with the deregulation of Wall Street. Do you think they didn't know what they were doing? With the legalization of stock buybacks and the Dodd-Frank and the deregulation and the no prosecutions after the 2008 subprime mortgage crash. Do you not think they know what they're doing? They know what they're doing, and they know they're going to keep getting away with it. They're aware of the fact that this is the goal now. It's not about buying and selling and the attribution of this and that or whatever else. It's about taking advantage of this global order that America, for the most part, has set up. We, through our hegemon, Pax Americana, through our money, through our dollar, for the most part, we are the superstructure that holds it together. That is the issue. But we're going to keep having recurring versions of this problem over and over and over and over and over again, unless something more fundamental is done. I guess what I'm basically saying is we cannot relegate this to Trump bad, you know? I feel there's a risk there. Trump is a unique threat. In that way, he is doing the best possible thing for those oligarchs, isn't he? He's so boorish and so stupid and so crazy that it's easy to blame these problems on him rather than them, you know? Like, he draws so much attention to himself. So when everything falls apart, you know, oh my God, he's threatening to undo NATO, invade Greenland, whatever else, it's so easy to look at him and go like, well, yeah, Trump is the guy crazy enough. Listen, Trump is the guy crazy enough, okay? But 2008 happened under Bush, and Bush economically is not really far from where Democrats are today. Frankly, he's not that far from where Republicans are today, sans Trump, you know? Like with the problems there, the deregulation of Wall Street, that is by no means like that was a one and done problem. It's shocking. It's exceptional. There's also a lot to be said about the fact, like, I do think we can all pat ourselves in the back a bit. The idea of, okay, so now we're going to acknowledge that the rules-based international order was a hollow lie that was propped up by Western powers to justify the economic superstructure they profited from. Okay, lefties have been saying that for ages. Where the fuck is our medal? You know? Okay, hey, to everyone who's shocked by this, you know, now that it's been said, can the people who said it earlier get a little bit of credit? They're only just now admitting it, you know? Lefties need to get much more annoying about a lot of these issues. Yeah, it's like the Reddit atheists, right? Where it's like, no, you should be more annoying. Like right now, the official position of the White House is that America should be a white Christian ethno-state. I think Reddit atheists can be more annoying. I think they're allowed to be more annoying than they are right now. I mean, Carney's been saying it since the 90s. He's been pushing for destroying the US dollar reserve for ages for this reason. Yeah, but what Carney needs to understand, Masaigu, is that it goes beyond just reliance on the United States. The problem with Carney is that the way he frames it, right? The issue is too much power has been ceded to America. But nothing would change, not in the long run, not meaningfully, if, you know, you kept the same fundamentals in line, but you de-dollarized. Right? It's not just a problem. Like international capital will continue to find ways to homogenize the trading environment, you know? Even if nations won't do it, corporations will in their stead. And without nations managing the rules of those international trades, I think if anything, things might get worse. The problem here isn't that we need the United States to shepherd those fraught waters. The problem here is that maybe fewer ships should be crossing those waters, you know? Like maybe we need to rethink some things. That's all.